Hello, everyone, and welcome to High Country Conservation Center's Fall Water Smart Irrigation Workshop, hosted with our partners from Irrigation Analysis. Before we begin, I want to make sure you are all aware that we are recording today's workshop, and we will be posting this on HC3's YouTube channel for anyone who was unable to attend today. So let's get started with introductions. I'm Heather Allen. I'm the Community Programs Director for High Country Conservation Center, and water is a big part of my job here at HC3 for short. HC3 is located in Frisco, and we support all of Summit County. We are a sustainability nonprofit that also leads the county in climate action, energy and resource-wise businesses, waste diversion and recycling, and sustainable food, in addition to our water conservation efforts. I'm here with my colleague, Jordan. Joe, would you like to introduce yourself really quick?
Hi, everyone. I'm Joe Rikers. I'm the Water Programs Coordinator, and I work directly underneath Heather, helping with our municipal water conservation efforts in Summit County. Today, I will be helping with technical assistance and answering your questions, or helping to bring up your questions to Bob and Doug as we go through the presentation.
Thanks, Joe. Today, you'll also be hearing from two experts from Irrigation Analysis, Bob Howie and Doug Smith. Bob, would you like to come off mute and introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Heather. My name is Bob Howie, and I'm one of the partners at Irrigation Analysis. We do water conservation and irrigation efficiency consultation. We also do some turf conversion assistance and project management work. But we are here today and always kind of trying to help people know how to irrigate better and know how to use water more efficiently. So thanks for joining us.
Doug?
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Doug Smith, also with Irrigation Analysis, and here just to tag team with Bob and Heather and Jordan to give everybody some information on how to properly program controllers.
Sounds like Doug might have a dog. All right.
About that, everyone.
What's your dog's name? Introduce your dog.
That's Lucy.
Lucy.
So,
all right. Awesome. So now for some quick housekeeping. In case you haven't been in a Microsoft Teams meeting in a while, I wanted to quickly walk you through the platform. So first, we ask that you make sure that you're on mute unless we call on you, so we can minimize background noise like doggies during the presentation. If possible, we do ask that you keep your camera on. We want today's presentation to be interactive, so it helps if we can see your faces. And use the hand raise feature if you have any questions, or you can ask your questions in the Q&A section. We will be using the chat section throughout the meeting and would love to hear from you there as well. You'll notice on our slides, there's going to be a lot of information. We're going to be sending these slides out after the workshop, so we wanted you to be able to reference as much of the information as possible post the event. Okay, so we want to know who you are too. So again, if you can, if you're driving and listening, don't try to do this, but if you can, please introduce yourself in the chat. So if you'll just throw your name, what organization you're with, where are you joining us from today, and maybe a little quick, why you're here, what do you hope to learn into the chat, just so we can know more about who's on the call. So you all know we've invited a variety of professionals to today's workshop. We might have landscape professionals on the call, ski resort and ground staff, HOA board members, water utility staff, or other municipal staff involved in water and irrigation management in Summit County and surrounding regions. So we probably have a wide range of folks in attendance, which is great. Awesome, thanks guys. So we have a lot to cover, so let's get started on our agenda slide. Here are the topics that Bob and Doug will cover today. We're going to make every effort to wrap on time. So in service to getting to the meat and potatoes, I'm going to stop talking, But before I pass it over to Doug to jump in, we also want to know, what's your familiarity coming into today with programming irrigation controllers? So on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being unfamiliar and 5 being an expert, how would you kind of rate yourself on programming controllers? So let's see. So yeah, just seeing who you are in the chat is great. Welcome, Amber, Cindy, Taylor. And then I'm just seeing a variety of numbers, depends on the controller. That's very fair and true. Okay, so keep popping your answers in the chat. And I think we're gonna have a great conversation today based on what I'm seeing. So Doug, if you want to take it away.
Great, thank you very much. So first of all, since this is a Quell-based refresher course, we're going to kind of start with some of the Quell forms that they have. But before we get into that, why is programming so important, and why should we care? And poor programming is really one of the biggest water wasters, because a lot of controllers are just timers. And we put in a run time, and we put in active days, and a lot of times that'll be for the summer program. They never get changed throughout the season, so we end up overwatering. So it is kind of a big water waster. So with the proper programming, regular adjustments, things like that, then we can reduce water use specifically in the spring shoulder season and the fall shoulder season, and that's generally when we can really get good water savings with proper programming. Also, with proper programming, the run times are going to be adjusted so you're not overwatering. That's allowing your turf or whatever plant material to get air to the root zones and things like that. So there's a lot of different factors that goes into creating a proper program. So like I said, with the Quell, they've got a form. And so what this is a way to create a schedule, and everybody that's gone through the Quell program has used this form before. So really what it involves is setting the cups, doing the irrigation audit, and from that we can determine what our net precipitation rate is, and then also what our distribution uniformity is. So those are two pretty important pieces to calculating a runtime. When we get down into it, so we're not going to fill this form out today. I just want to refresh you guys of, oh yeah, I remember that form, and it's very tedious. So in order to get programming, especially if you have a controller with a lot of zones or stations, you have to do this for every single zone to get the proper runtime, and it's very time consuming. And so we want to be able to program our controllers. We all know that we're busy during the summer months. We don't have time to go back to every site and reprogram controllers every week. It's just not feasible, and we know that, and everybody knows that. But that's the proper way to do it, actually. All right, so how to do it. So basic programming requires the following. So you need to know how long you need to run a station for, and how many days per week you need to run a station for. There's a lot of other factors that can go in that, such as microclimates and soil types and things like that for your cycles and so forth. But really the bottom line is, how many minutes am I going to put in there? Because controllers only think in minutes. It's just a timer. So there's smart timers, and then there's old, just put in a number timers. But the bottom line is, it's always going to be how many minutes am I running that zone for. For the programming, we need to know what the zones are we're irrigating. So we need to know what the sprinkler type is, what the nozzle size, what the spacing is, and the flow rate. And that all will help us determine what the precipitation rate is. That is a key factor. It's one of the main factors in creating run times, is knowing what the precipitation rate is. And just for a refresher, precipitation rate, think of that as rainfall. So how much rain did we get in an hour? And that's how precipitation rates are measured as well, in inches per hour. The zone uniformity, that is when we put out the catch cups, we can determine how uniform that particular zone is. And when we get into the quell numbers, that's called the runtime multiplier. So in essence, when we use the runtime multiplier based on the inefficiency of the zone or non-uniformity of the zone, really what we're doing is we're overwatering the areas that aren't dry spots. So we really want to go on the low side, and we'll get to that in a minute with the irrigation water requirement versus the plant water requirement. And here's the screen right here. So remember that when we're in the quell, if we're going to have the plant water requirement, which does not include the uniformity factor. So it's only going to be the weather and then the plant type. The irrigation water requirement will take that, and then it will add the non-uniformity or the irrigation runtime multiplier. So you can see we have the IRT min and the IRT max, and then again the only difference is going to be the uniformity. So remember at the bottom it says the irrigation water requirement includes the runtime multiplier, which will irrigate more to make up for the poor uniformity. So rather than doing that, our recommendation is to see where your dry spots are. So if you go with the minimum amount, your dry spots will probably show up due to that non-uniformity. Then go out and look at the system and see if we can make adjustments out there rather than turning the entire zone up to make up for a dry spot. So that's another way to save water. All right, how do we calculate a precipitation rate? So there's two different methods. We have the gross and we have the net. And as you saw earlier with the form and the quell, the only way to get the net precipitation rate is to put catch cups down. The other way to do it quickly is gross, which means that we're just going to be calculating theoretical flow rates and then dividing it by the areas, and then we can come up with a gross precipitation rate. So our general formula for spray is the 96.3, and that's just a constant that converts gallons per hour into inches. I can go through that later in a different class if you want to know how that came about. And then multiply that by the gallons per minute of the zone, and then you divide that by the area of the zone. So with that, that will give you the gross precipitation rate. And then there's a different formula for drip. It's a little different because with drip emitters, you're putting water directly to a spot rather than you're covering the whole thing. So while it will create a precipitation rate, just keep in mind that the uniformity on a drip zone is not something you can really measure, because your emitters could be 1 foot apart or they could be 5 feet apart, and you're still putting down the same amount of water. But because of the area, it will really impact your uniformity. So you don't really want to use your uniformity on a drip zone when you're scheduling that. All right, so for an example, we've just got a square, just to make it easy, 28 by 28 foot square here. And if you imagine with the X's represent catch cups, so you don't really need to look at that part, but the little circles are representing sprinkler heads. So we have 4 90-degree heads, we have 4 180-degree heads, and we have 1 360-degree heads. So with this example, we are using the Hunter MP 1000 rotary nozzles, which are a matched precipitation rate nozzle, which means that if you have the nozzle on there and you make it a quarter or 90 degree, and then you open it up to a 180 degree, well, when the area doubles, so does the flow rate. So that means that you're putting down the same amount of water regardless if it's a quarter or a half. You're not putting down this, you're putting out twice as much water, I should say, but it's twice the area. So, but that's matched precipitation. And then the second example will be spray heads, and it's the same. So most of your spray head nozzles will have that matched precipitation rate. The only time we really have to think that and consider that is if those are rotor zones. So let's go back a slide real quick, Jordan, please. Okay, so what I'm looking at here is if we count up all those heads and we look at the flow rates of these nozzles, you can see that the 90-degree nozzle has got a 0.21 gallon per minute. The 180 has got double that. So there's your 0.42. And then your full circle would be double your 180. And so that gives you 0.84 gallons per minute. So we count all that up, we get 3.36 gallons per minute. It's 28 by 28 feet square, and that gives us 784 square feet. You plug those numbers into the formula that we saw a minute ago, and then that will give us 0.41 inches per hour. All right, so we're about 0.4 of an inch per hour. Now you can go to the next one, please. All right, so that same exact area, but now we're, instead of using the MP rotators, we're using a Rainbird 15-foot spray nozzle. So then you have the same number of heads. So you look at the 490s, the 4180s, and the 1360, and then the total flow for that is now 14.8 gallons per minute, but the same area. So you're putting down a lot more water in the same area. And if we run those numbers, that'll give us a 1.81 inch per hour precipitation rate. So think about when it rains and you get an inch in an hour, that's quite a bit of rain, right? So it's very easy to get a lot of water down through some different nozzles and so forth. And depends on the spacing too. So the more compact it is, if you have a large nozzle in a small area, your precipitation rate is going to go up. And that will also impact your uniformity. So we have to be careful of how we space our heads and how they're installed and what nozzles we're using. So just there we go. And then for the next screen, please. Okay, so another way to look at the precipitation rates is through the manufacturer's catalogs, and I only selected this one because it's the MP1000, and that was one of the examples, but all the manufacturers have this type of grid for their nozzles, regardless of their heads, which makes it pretty nice. And if you look at the MP1000 data on the left, you'll see that the 40 is bold. Well, that's the recommended operating pressure for that nozzle. And so if we have the 40 PSI for the 90, the same for the 180, and then we look at those gallons per minute for each of those, that's where I got the information for running the calculation. So we had 0.21 for the 90, 0.42 for the 180, and 0.84 for the 360. So if you go over to the next, go back to the slide, next, right there. So you have two precipitation rates. There's a little black square and a little black triangle. And so what that's telling you is that if you have a square spacing with that nozzle at 40 PSI, you should have about 0.41 inches per hour precipitation rate. And if you look at the triangle, it's a little bit heavier. And the reason for that is because when you go to a triangular spacing and you keep your head-to-head coverage, there you have your row spacing and then you have your head spacing. So your head spacing would still be at the 14-foot radius, but what happens is when you triangulate it, your row spacing gets a little shorter, so you have a little less area, and so you're putting that same amount of water down in a smaller area. Therefore, your precipitation rate goes up. So is triangular spacing better than square spacing? Not necessarily. Sometimes it is, and sometimes it isn't, and it really depends on the nozzle. It does put down water a little faster, but that doesn't mean it's good or bad. So a lot of, there's I won't say misconception because it depends, but the triangular spacing is always better, and that's not always the case. Okay, so here's our, again, with the calculating the precipitation, net precipitation rate. The only way to do that is to run the catch cup test and then fill it out on the form and get your net that way. And the thing with the precipitation rates is if you have any overspray. So right now, when we're looking at this photograph and we're looking at all those catch cups, it's like, oh, we might have really good uniformity there, but what we're not taking into consideration is any of the overspray. So if those are all, if the heads on the left side are full circles and they're spraying that shrub bed, yeah, we've got a good uniformity, but we're still not being efficient because those heads are watering two different zones, two different plant types. So anyway, just something to think about when you're looking at your net precipitation rate. Okay, so the precipitation rate, again, is one of the most important factors because you have to have that to plug into the equation that we saw a minute ago. All right, now we got to figure out how much we need to water. So the other piece of that equation is our ET. So the ET is your plant water requirement, and it's simply evapotranspiration for a specific plant type. So you have to know what type of plant you're irrigating, reference ET, and then you can apply factors to that based on what type of plant material it is, whether it's shrubs or a native or annuals or whatever that is. So where do we get ET? We get ET from weather stations. We can get it from historical data. With climate change, it's a little different because, if we're looking at data that was a 30-year average from 30 years ago, it's probably not going to be as accurate as it once was. University extensions also a lot of times have data. Water providers sometimes provide data. So you just got to be able to use the resources that are out there to try to find what the ET values are. Confirm whether the ET data is a daily, weekly, or monthly. So you might get a chart and say, okay, here's our ET for this week or for this day or this month. So you just need to know what that value is. When we calculate a schedule, we're usually looking at an ET per week. So especially if we're looking kind of forward to, we're going to program this for the month of August, say, when we're halfway through it now, but we're going to say, okay, for the month of August, we have 2.5 inches of ET for turf grass this week. So we want to program that controller to put down 2.5 inches. So that would be our ET based on historical data, let's say. If you have a weather station, then you could plug it in based on past. So weather stations only read what's happened. So if you're using a weather station, you may be watering more on a daily basis. So you're kind of making up for past ET, and then you're deficit irrigating essentially. So you're watering for what has already occurred. All right, determining how many days a week to irrigate should be based on the weekly ET. The soil type is important. The root zone is important. There's, like I mentioned early on, there's a lot of different factors that go into the cycles and how many minutes we can run each cycle. So we need to know what that data is. Also, watering days are could be based on local water provider mandates. So, Heather, did you want to talk about the Summit County watering schedule?
Yeah. Ooh,
Is this a
Thank
good place
you.
to do that?
I think it's great. I don't know why I'm getting feedback. Doug, will you try muting? See if that helps. How's that? Okay, thank you. So essentially, a year or so ago, all of the towns got together and kind of agreed on a watering schedule. And Jordan, I think, is going to get out of the presentation for a second and take us to the website that shows what this is. But it's essentially like for you, if you live in Summit County, or for any of your clients, we have mostly voluntary days of the week that you should be watering. And again, this is all in the name of water conservation and kind of going back to that evapotranspiration. So we want folks only watering on certain days, so more people aren't using their unfair share of water, and also during certain times of the day, which you all are probably aware, you don't want to be. Ideally, you're not watering at the hottest part of the day where you're losing up to 50% of that water to evaporation. Obviously, this is going to look differently if you're establishing new plants or new grasses. But again, if you have an existing kind of like lawn, we ask that people be watering it against this schedule. So if you weren't aware, or if you are speaking with any customers in Summit County specifically, please point them to this site. And then Brian, I see your hand. And one thing I want to say before we go away from this, to your question, is just like if you're on a well, or if you have customers on a well, they need to make sure that they're even allowed to do outdoor watering. A lot of our folks on wells are not and don't have that in their augmentation plan. So just another thing to talk to your customers about if you do irrigation with folks. All right. Brian, what was your question?
Yeah. So since there's nothing really about science that has 3-day-a-week watering, typically, and the plant material, do you have variances when you're using weather-based controllers and sticking within a water budget that's been developed, and you're able to stay on that budget, do you allow for variances not to water on those specific days because it's more about plant health and weather driving the days of the week in which irrigation needs to occur? Just wondering if that is something that you allot for, since it is kind of voluntary.
That's a great question. And I would say yes. I think especially since everywhere except for the town of Breck here in Summit County, they are voluntary. And there, even in Breckenridge, there isn't necessarily anyone going around and policing this. But I think yeah, like we recognize that we want you to have rain sense watering and to not be watering when it's raining. So if you can, this is like just high recommendation. So again, that where no one is overwatering when we're trying to conserve water as a community. And Doug or Bob, if y'all have anything that you would add around just like from the science side to that, but I would say from a community conservation effort, yeah, these are just voluntary and recommended.
Yep, no, that's an excellent question and point. And yeah, we like to water based on soil moisture, and that's what Brian was alluding to, is that, or alluding to rather, is that you may not need to water on every third day. You could go longer between irrigations, or conversely, if it's hot, you may need to water sooner, and that's for the benefit of the turf grass or whatever you're watering. So yeah, it's a valid and often asked question.
I want to chime in too. I mean, I think definitely if you don't need to be watering 3 days a week, water 2 or water 1. So there's nothing magic about 3 days by any means. So yeah, it doesn't dial it back if you can. So
it's just typically better than watering 7 days per week.
Yes, sir.
And the next bullet point when we get there. All right, so then the third bullet point is where we're at, and it's generally speaking, deeper and more infrequent irrigations are more beneficial than irrigating daily. And really, I mean, we're getting to the deep infrequent. We want the water to go down into the root zone deeper, and then allow that moisture to evapotranspirate through the plant material and evaporation, and that allows air into the soil, which the plants also need. So if we're watering every day, we don't really allow that oxygen to get down to the root zone, and it's not as healthy for the plants. So it's actually beneficial to water more infrequently. Irrigating to the ET 3 to 4 times a week allows, that's just saying that leads oxygen to the root zone. And then during the cooler shoulder seasons, spring and fall, it'll be lower. So that's when we need to go out and reprogram our controllers accordingly. And again, how much time do we have to go out there and do that? But you may have 1 or 2 times per week, and that's kind of what Bob mentioned too. You don't need to water all the time. Okay, so without going through the form of for every station, trying, the Quell form, it's very tedious, as I mentioned, to come up with this. So this is kind of the quick scheduling guide. And really, there's 2 things you really need. You need your weekly ET and your precipitation rate. You have to have that. If you don't have that, you're guessing. And so if you just say, I'm going to run my rotor zone for 30 minutes and my spray zone for 15 minutes, you're simply guessing. So we do need to figure out for every system what our ET rate, or excuse me, what our precipitation rate is. And we do that once, and really you don't have to do anything else. That precipitation rate's really not going to change unless something happens to the system. So if you change nozzles, you'll want to recalculate it. Or if you add a head, you'll want to recalculate it. So but otherwise, if you're not changing it, your precipitation rate will probably remain the same. ET is the moving target, because that changes every day, every week. So we need to have a good way to capture that, and we plug that number in, and then we can get our different run times. So what we're showing here is our weekly ET. I'm using an example of 1.75 inches. And on the top one, we have the precipitation rate of 0.4, which would have been the MP rotators we saw a little bit ago. and we plug that into our runtime, and that gives us 262 minutes for the week. And we want to irrigate 3 days per week, so we would water 262 minutes divided by the 3 days gives us 87 minutes of runtime per irrigation. So that seems like an awful lot, right? But we're only watering 3 days a week on a pretty hot day. So with the very low precipitation rate, we need to water that, for a very long time. So 87 minutes. And this is one of the things that in the field, a lot of times it's like, well, we can't do that, especially in a retrofit, because we just don't have the water window for that kind of runtime. And so the only way you can do it is if you look at the flow rates. So if we go back, we don't have to go back, Jordan, I'm just saying, but if we look at the flow rates between the two zones, there's a big difference there, and we may have the capacity to run multiple zones, but you have to have a controller that's capable of doing that and knowing how to manage that. So, and then we look at the next example, and our weekly ET is 1.75 inches still, so we have the same amount of ET, but now our precipitation rate's at 1.8 inches, representing the Rainbird 15-foot nozzles. And now we plug those numbers in, we water 58.3 minutes per week, and we divide that by the 3 days per week, and now we're running 20 minutes per week, per irrigation 3 times a week. So if our ET is lower than 1.75, then these numbers are going to adjust down as well. And if we get a really hot day, and let's say we have 2 inches per week, then these numbers are going to go up a little bit. So and that's where the programming weekly is really important, because if it gets cooler, we don't want to continue to water at 1.75 inches. And that's kind of the quick and easy way to get your run times, is just knowing your ET and knowing your precipitation rate. So are you currently using weather-based controllers? And hopefully you are, or, and it's, I know there's a lot of different brands out there, and there's a lot of old controllers as well, and we can't change them all at once. But the question is, what do you like or not like about these controllers? Yeah, I like the comment about the specifying them, but do they get used? Right, and that's about us as a community, irrigation community, teaching end users how to use the controllers properly. And then I think there was a comment earlier about being able to program some controllers and better at some than others. And that's a great point, because all controllers need those two things. You have to have a scheduled day, and you have to have a runtime, no matter what brand or what style or what model or anything like that. But they're all different. So yeah, some of them are not very intuitive, or they just are a little different, and you get comfortable with one, and that's fine. Whatever works is good.
Doug, did you see Brian's hand?
Oh, I did not. Brian.
One of my questions back in the equations, what might be a good guidance or something that you could refer to is when you're reducing the number of minutes per irrigation event, and you're keeping it 3 days a week, what might be a good determining factor instead of reducing minutes on those run days to actually take the day away? Because I see that as kind of important, because you'll hit a point where the run times don't make sense. It actually makes sense to pull the day out or add a day in to the schedule. Could you maybe talk to that potential?
Sure. Yeah, and that's a great point. So it depends on how much your irrigation, your ET is changing. So if you're modifying your run times down to a couple of minutes, yeah, you'd probably want to skip days and then water more on the days that you irrigate. So rather than watering 3 days for, say, 60 minutes, you'd be watering 2 days for this, for 40 minutes, rather than making the 3 day. I don't know if I said that very well, but you're watering more for the 2 days than you would be for the 3 days in minute wise, but you're putting down less water by taking the day out.
Yeah, I just was kind of wondering if you guys kind of had a baseline of knowledge of, you know, for a sprays, MPs, rotator, a certain precipitation rate, let's call it, at which your ET values are such that your run times get so low? What's that? Do you have a kind of predetermined threshold that you could easily educate somebody? Hey, when your run times become X% of what they are midsummer, the directive is to take a day away, not continue to reduce the runtime for the days it is already irrigating. I thought maybe you had something already kind of understood
Yeah, I don't
and
think
all your
there's any.
knowledge.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that, but yeah, I don't think that there's any magic number for that. I think it depends a lot on the water manager or whoever's taking care of that to determine what days they're going to irrigate and how many minutes it is. And just if you're watering as a station for 1 minute, maybe that's enough. If it's a spray zone and you're putting down 1.8 inches in an hour, so it's not a lot of water. Um, well, depending on if it's an MP rotator and they're putting down 1 minute, you're not going to get any water. So there's got to be some education for everybody to understand how the sprinklers work and how much water they're putting down. But I don't think there's any magic formula that we can put in a chart that says this is when you need to stop watering that zone and skip a day. I don't know if that makes sense, but it's more of a water manager's decision.
Also, I was gonna you're assuming you're not using the smart controller's not making a lot of those decisions for you, and may not so much as the days probably as, yeah, do we need to water today? So, but yeah, I mean, it's kind of, I also don't think there are probably too many. It would be perfect world that everybody adjusted their controllers every week, but I don't think that's happening on more of the manual operation, shall we say, that typically is out there. So it's kind of you start out, the way springtime, you have one run time a week probably and follow the same thing on the back end of it. And then you bring it up as the temperature and conditions warrant, and then get to your 3 days. And if it's super hot, 4 days a week, and then you start dialing it back down on the other end. So I think that's pretty, if people are even doing that, they're doing pretty well, changing their programming that way. I think it's pretty challenging to dial your minutes slowly and then eventually, take off a watering day and then dial up your minutes, kind of thing. That's pretty,
That's pretty advanced for most users.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Blaine asked in the chat, like, is there an assumption about soil quality in any of these formulas?
No. So all we're doing is we're watering to ET. And so when we continue the presentation here in a minute, we'll talk a little bit about that, because soils are very important also, because if you have a tight soil like clay, you're going to have to put in your infiltration rates into the formula and determine how many cycles. So if you go back to that form that we had from Quell and you go follow that form, then that will create the schedule for you with any of the additional cycles.
Okay, I just thought they were talking about, running their cycles for X amount of minutes and whatnot, and often, at least in our world, our soils, it kind of will determine that there's I could water something for 80 minutes, but I'm going to get about 20 minutes of effective watering. So, as far as the breaking it up.
Yeah, well, so it completely depends on the precipitation rate, even though the minutes doesn't, it's like, what's the precipitation rate and then what's the infiltration rate of your soil?
Okay, so you're gonna talk about soils later then.
Well, not too much, because we've got very limited time today. We're just talking about programming run times. So, but when we get back, in fact, we're kind of behind schedule, so we can jump back into that presentation. Jordan, please.
I think we're on the next slide after that chat question.
Okay, let's see here.
I think we're up to Bob with the weather-based irrigation controllers.
Yeah, I'm not seeing the presentation, so I don't know what I did here.
So I'll jump in, Doug.
Yeah,
You can jump back in if you want. Do you get it or no? Not yet.
Go.
Sorry, do you have it?
Go.
Okay. So this is kind of summarizing the value and benefits of weather-based irrigation controllers. And they really do work, proven technology. There's a wide range of controller brands to choose from with the varying features. Some are very affordable and will save water even as fast as will save water, will pay for themselves even in one season. You can enter station and zone data from an app, and that's super helpful if you haven't used these things. Having something on Wi-Fi or cellular where you can remotely access it, super helpful out when you're actually on site in the field. But also if you're not on site and something's going on, you can make adjustments, changes, or shut it down, turn it on, whatever. Automated runtime adjustments and scheduling days. The weather-based irrigation controllers programmed, and once you put the data in, it will make those adjustments. You have, again, rain holds. It will do sometimes predictive weather monitoring. Each of these depends on which brand and system you're involved with and want to be using or are using. And Doug mentioned several different ET scheduling methods where the data is coming to determine the ET for that date and for that location. And hopefully, again, the historic data is not necessarily all that beneficial because of the changes in weather, and just it's not the same as real-time or near real-time weather over the last 24 hours. So remote access to the app I mentioned, and you can receive notifications, alarms, or alerts. Multiple users can have access to those or just look at the system. So super great technology if you're not using it. Yeah, even on a sort of a simple residential, they can be super helpful, but especially on a more complicated, complex site, you can really do a lot. They have a lot of power and really can help you save water and be more efficient. So you do need a Wi-Fi or cellular connection, and HC3 has rebates for these. So anyway, good.
Yeah, I'm not going to talk a lot about our rebates really quick because for time's sake, Bob, but
Sure.
here is a list of the rebatable kind of like water efficient upgrades. So if you support Summit County residents, this is specific to Summit County, although I imagine if you're operating in another county, you have similar rebates. This is all on HC3's website. So if you operate within Summit County on irrigation, it's probably worthwhile looking into our rebate program and get some money back in either your hands or your customers.
So what can you do to save water with your programming? Yeah, runtime should be accurate for the week's ET. Kind of how hot and dry it is, basically the wind, humidity, temperature will all drive that, and for your plant material, of course. Fewer water days per week when ET is lower. Talked about that. Know your property and system. Have a zone map, zone list, which includes head and plant type. So we'll kind of touch on that again, but when you're doing your data collection, data entry to set up your smart controller, you are kind of factoring these things in, but it's also super helpful to have that so you can just manage your system better, and if you need to, manage it remotely as well. So then just the best laid plans doesn't mean that everything's working right, and you need to walk and check your property looking for wet and dry zones and areas, and then adjust the programming. Just because it's calculating everything doesn't mean that it's spot on and getting everything right. And most of these systems you can do some manual adjustments or programming adjustments if there's kind of consistently wet or dry situations on a zone. And it's also just make your repairs, get your nozzles clean, raise your heads, keep the zones in the system working right. So that has a huge amount to do with efficient watering and proper system programming, not just keep continually cranking up and adding time, even on a smart controller, making it water more when that's not really the issue. So next. So you guys can self-check here if you want, and you don't have to tell us. But anyway, typical controller program we see, and this is like really super common, and most of the people on this, in this meeting are very attuned and not doing these things, but you see this probably all the time as well. But set the controller at the beginning of the season and walk away and forget it. It's just like, and a lot of times it gets set to like, oh yeah, we're in a hurry, we don't have time, or we don't want to, have a problem. So we're just going to go ahead and set it at, 3 days a week, 4 days a week, watering, full on watering, April 1, May 1, whatever it is. And that's what it's going to do the rest of the season. So just wasting a ton of water and being really pretty neglect in, any kind of water management and any kind of, it's bad for the client, it's bad for the plant material. So everybody needs to do better, and everybody in the industry, the bar needs to be raised. So anyway, on to everything set the same way. So lots of times we run into controllers and everything's, we'll just say 20 minutes. Every zone's on 20 minutes, and it doesn't matter what kind of zone it is. It doesn't matter the plant material. It doesn't matter if it's, cool and shady or hot and dry. It's all the same. And it's like, again, really improper, wrong way to be programming a controller. So we have over there on the right side, it says, don't be that guy. So, don't, and I think it's good to kind of call people out for it in as polite a way as you can. So if you see that going on, or if some of the guys working for you are doing it that way, it's like, come on, we got to, let's do this right. So another one is setting all spray heads for 10 minutes. It's like default, rotors 20 minutes, no matter what. And again, no matter the plant material, hydrozone, weather, shade, sun, slope, soil type, plant material. So watering 4, 5, 6, 7 days a week. And we see that really actually quite a bit. Obviously, if you have annual flowers, it's kind of, you do need to water more. And so you can have that zone water more, but that should hopefully be on its own zone, own hydrozone. So, but again, it's like that really shouldn't be happening. Any of those, 4 is probably pretty much a maximum watering if it's extremely hot and dry days per week. So longer run times, we think the other day I saw a run time that was 1 hour and 40 minutes. Obviously on a drip system, that might be just right, or drip zone. But on any other overhead irrigation, that's just outrageous kind of watering. So the whole point of that obviously is so you don't have runoff. You make a swamp, or you just kind of create a river. It's like, yeah, you put down the water, but you didn't need to put down that much, and you could have put down a lot less and applied it more in bursts with shorter run times, like a cycle and soak kind of approach, with some separation between those irrigations. So turn up the entire controller when there are a few dry spots instead of checking the zones and fixing the issues. The real common thing. Not turning down the system in the spring and the fall, just having it same all along. And again, having annual flowers, shrubs and perennials, or irrigated native running the same as all your turf zones. And again, don't be that guy, but hopefully none of you are. But the industry is doing that a lot, as we all know. So next. So if you don't have a weather-based irrigation controller, smart controller, what do? Well, you got to encourage your customer or your boss or whatever it is to get one and help you to be better manage your system and maintain the system. And just, the benefits are listed there. You just have a lot more control, you're more efficient, and we're not doing wasteful or excessive watering. So if you don't have one, which is, a good amount of the controllers out there, if you're out in the field or your company's doing this, just have a plan for managing your systems and programming each irrigation zone separately, the amount of water, including the hydrozone situation. We'll talk about that. As Doug said, precipitation rate, sun exposure, slope, soils, factoring in everything program accordingly. Don't just, default and put it all the same. Have a regular set schedule for your system checks and property walks and programming adjustments. So just kind of almost a checklist that when you're going to do system check and when you're going to adjust programming, sort of a standard thing. And then obviously there's going to be exceptions sometimes. So next slide. Not next slide. Go ahead, Brian.
I
We're
think
kind
you
of
might
getting.
have a question.
Yeah,
Oh,
go
Brian's
ahead,
got his
Brian.
hand up.
What do you got? We're short on time, so we got to make it snappy here.
So one of the things I'd like in a bigger conversation around control systems for especially you utility people that are on this, is that a control system today is much more than just the thing that creates the schedules. It's also the flow sensors, the master valves, the rain sensors, soil moisture sensors, as an all-inclusive system that manages water, and it is the control system. And sometimes the systems can't operate correctly without all those peripheral components. And so instead of just referring to a controller as a controller when you're looking at rebates and things like that, to incorporate all those things as a control system, because they all work together to create an outcome. And I think that's one of the things that's missed a lot in rebates and having conversations. When you can include those flow sensors, master valves, it's always a better outcome. So just a quick comment on how those things are typically rebated. It would be nice if there was a shift in the industry at how that's done.
Yeah, it definitely would be good to have, more of those features incorporated and rebated. But there's some that are out there doing it, so those are good pieces of the system, as you said, to kind of make it all work right, but not commonly rebated. So I agree. We gotta fly here. You all know about hydro zones for the most part. Just one of the challenges is just, high in water use plant material on the same zone. You get your sun and shade factors on the same zone, slopes on the same zone. And it's pretty challenging to, segregate and separate those things. And again, you need to, we kind of short on time, but you do need to program accordingly and try to have your system set up so that the similar areas of landscaping are getting the similar amounts in similar locations are getting similar amounts of irrigation. And it's very hard to do that if you have high, medium, and low water use plant material on the same zone. Obviously, we all see turf and shrubs together. It's a classic example of a bad situation, and they need to be separated if you can. It shouldn't have ever been designed that way or installed that way, but it happens a lot. So if you can try to undo bad hydrozone situations, that will help you greatly in your water use and make your plants healthier, happier, and use water more efficiently and appropriately. So we're going to skip on. And again, you can see the hydrozones in that. So as Brian just mentioned, talking about master valves and flow sensors, this is kind of the next level for smart controllers and weather-based controllers. The better ones and the higher, larger ones and more sophisticated will have master valves that open and close when the system is on, close when the system's off, obviously. They have flow sensors that track how much water is being used and how much water is being used by each zone. And those flow sensors can detect and manage leaks or breaks and send alerts. Even high flow or low flow situations. So you'll know if a zone's not working and it should be, or it's, way too much water is going out. You'll understand which zone, and very easy to go to that zone, back to a zone map. You can go right to it and say, what's wrong here? And let's get that taken care of. So it will shut down a system completely if it's, kind of an extreme situation. So those are super key components. They are available in all systems, even residential, but kind of becomes, you got to kind of want them and understand them and be wanting them in your system to have them usually. So otherwise they don't get installed, but they are beneficial, especially with the smart technology that's out there. And you got to make sure you have the ones that are compatible with your controller. and make sure that that's in your programming of that controller, that it's and wired in so that it's working right. Next. Rain and freeze sensors. Again, we are big proponents of these. These really are not obviously smart controllers, but if there's a good amount of soil or rain, it will shut off. Freeze as well, which especially in Summit County, that could be really nice, not ice down on sidewalks. So those things are very, very useful. They're not foolproof. You got to pay attention to them. Make sure that they're shutting off when they should shut off and turn on when they should. Change them out, make sure they're properly situated. We see tons of them that are leaning over or on the side of a building, and it means 50% of the rainfall is not even hitting those. So yeah, they are wireless. You guys have probably used them, but we're big proponents of those, and they kind of will shut things down when you have sufficient moisture and let you water when things have dried out. Next. Another key feature, especially for the non-smart controllers and people using those, is using seasonal adjust and or percent adjust features on the controllers. So really useful tool, and that kind of simplifies having to turn up and turn down your minutes or run time. Does that globally on the controller that you're working with. So that's, it's a quick way to say, hey, it's hot and dry. I need to bump this up, the whole thing up a little bit. Hey, it's cool and wet. I don't need to be watering, 10, 20, whatever minutes is appropriate for that zone. You don't need to be doing that. You can dial back. So something to use if nothing else. So if you don't have time to kind of change the programming, either run days or run times, excuse me. Next, zone mapping. Kind of talked about that a little bit. It's kind of logical. We don't see a lot of zone maps. We see zone lists that are sort of hieroglyphic. Usually it's like whoever wrote them probably knows what they say, but it's showing the type of plant material, obviously zone number, type of plant material, type of irrigation, like spray, rotor, drip, etc., and super helpful on that list. And then, but the map as well to show you what area of the property is being watered by that zone, and it really helps better manage your water and make changes to your controllers and that kind of thing. Also useful to share that map with the property manager, the board, HOA board, or others, so that they can help pinpoint issues and not just say there's a broken head out here, so somewhere on my property. So next. Self-evaluation, just how do y'all rate yourself on programming controllers? Are you thoughtful, do a good job, or do you just kind of wing it? Hopefully you're not on the bad guy list, or you're just winging it, setting it and forgetting it. How can you do better? What are your biggest challenges to better programming? How often do you change your programming? How would you rate yourself on using irrigation technology in general? The weather-based smart controllers, high efficiency nozzles, rain sensors, those kind of things, flow sensors, master valves, those kind of pieces. How much, are you familiar with those? And if you're not, it's kind of like, find out, ask questions, and go to some of the classes and things and learn more about them and how they work. And are you using that seasonal adjust I mentioned? That could be a really helpful tool if you're not using it, so people in your organization understand how to use it and to be paying attention to it. You got to watch out that you don't, when using that seasonal adjust, that you don't forget about it, because you're thinking you want to turn up the water and you end up increasing the minutes on the controller, and it's like, well, I already increased the percent adjust 20%, type thing. So yeah, how well do you do at shutting down or turning down your controllers when there's been good rainfall, and or it's cooler in the cooler seasons of the year? So again, I think it's a good slide to kind of check yourself. Next. Really key thing, talk to your customers. This is the time of year to talk to your customers, especially those with weak and inefficient systems. Discuss their problems, discuss how, let's upgrade these. Are you interested? Do you even care about how the systems work? Or do you not care at all? Or do you not have budget at all, which can be kind of a challenge. but, you know, also kind of like, hey, we want to save water and be good citizens and also, you know, irrigate our plant material properly. So kind of engage in a conversation with customers, especially, you know, it's a great thing to do in the fall and the spring, kind of early and late season when there's time to talk, I guess, more so. Rebates, again, we talked about. So that's another, again, I waive rebates in front of them. There also are system audits offered through HC3's. So the customers can take advantage of those and get a system inspection for a pretty inexpensive price and also get recommendations on how to save water. So again, larger properties, towns, et cetera, this is the budget season. So talking to your customers now, giving them pricing for new controllers, and that kind of works great winter work, great off-season work to be doing. So kind of a win-win by getting the word out and kind of engaging with people about their systems and being better waterers, better irrigators, better water consumers. Next. All right. Send this back to Heather, or you can. Do you
Yeah,
want to?
thanks. Yeah, I'll be quick. This is just a QR code that'll take you to the website that I dropped in the chat earlier. So we can go ahead and bounce to the next slide, Joe. So in addition to irrigation rebates, we also encourage folks to take a look at their lawn layouts and as Bob was saying earlier around like how landscaping is done, like we want folks to convert away from the Kentucky bluegrass thirsty grass to low water native and pollinator friendly plants. We have some DIY stuff on our website in addition to like some demonstration gardens around the county, and again, just rebate dollars to go back into their pockets when they commit. Next slide. And all of that's on our website. I appreciate everyone's engagement throughout. And just for the sake of time, we have a slide that's got all of our contact information on it so that you can reach out to us if you have questions after today's event. And we will stick around after this. At least I can speak for Joe and I that we've got a little bit of time after this if anyone wants to stay on and ask questions. But I think like we'll end on this slide. So let's just keep going for a second. We do have a slide for next steps. So if you don't know already how to go get your continued education unit credit, here is a step-by-step. And again, we will email this to you all. And I'm sorry to like speed along through this here at the end. And then we'll be sending out a survey in addition to these slides for you all to give us feedback around what you might want to hear. And if you engage with the survey, you'll enter for a chance to win a $50 Lowe's gift card. So it's not much, but you know, it's it'll reduce your bill next time you're at Lowe's around the state. I think that was all for our formal presentation. So if you just go back to our contact and if you need to drop, go right ahead. If you want to stay on and engage with us, we'll be here for a few minutes. Thank you again for coming.
Yeah, thank you guys. If you have other questions or anything to follow up, feel free to come on, unmute. No worries. Looks like no questions.
Yeah. Good job. Thanks, you guys. That was a lot of information. Appreciate you being the experts here.
Well, there's a lot to cover in a short time. So there are obviously questions that we didn't cover because of time. So this was really kind of trying to show the pain involved in calculating a runtime and a schedule, and then hitting more on the weather-based controllers that can do that for you was the kind of the general intent.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and like some of that math, like it's exciting, but I'm sure there's like tools and resources for folks if they need it to do some of that. Sophisticated formulas.
I'm gonna go ahead and end the event recording.
Thank you.
All right. You guys, anything else? Yeah, that's good.
I
Any-
will